The Industry 101. Here are some highlights in this episode. Being specific to what your question was regarding sending beats directly to someone. There are some pros and cons to doing it that way. There's no real set way to do things now. I mean, especially in light of the quarantine, as you're saying, there's so many different ways to just become innovative in terms of how you approach anyone. It just so happens that there's a bunch of stories out there where producers, primarily those who are just getting started, they're sending their beats out to named artists even, and getting some responses. We really want to do something with it, we'll get back to you. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Welcome to the Industry 101. Class is beginning right now. Welcome to the Industry 101, where if you have questions, I'll get you answers. I'm your host, Robbie Jenkins, and when we come back, we're going to touch on some questions about the best way for recording artists to get their music heard, and also another way to get paid. Stick with us, we'll be right back.
Here comes a groove of tunes that make you wanna move. A song, a jam that's gonna make you feel so good. I got a groove of tunes that make you wanna move. Made you a song that's gonna make you feel so good now.
For those of you who have been here since day one, thank you for sticking with us. And for those of you who are here for the first time, thank you for coming. Overture Entertainment Television is a new network of which I am extremely proud. We have one documentary and a series that has just been launched recently, and we're growing steadily, but we can only do that with your support. And so for that, I say thank you. Yeah. And we're back. Take your seat and take some notes. You don't want to miss what we have for you in this episode of the Industry 101. We're back. And our first question for this episode comes to us from DW in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And DW writes, there has been talk that now, because of the quarantine, producers have been DMing name artists beats. Do you think recording artists could take this route in getting their music heard? And if so, how would you suggest we approach them? Okay, so I'm going to start off by saying that there's no real set way to do things now. I mean, especially in light of the quarantine, as you're saying, there's so many different ways to just become innovative in terms of how you approach anyone. But being specific to what your question was regarding sending beats directly to someone, there are some pros and cons to doing it that way. It just so happens that there's a bunch of stories out there where producers, primarily those who are just getting started, they're sending their beats out to named artists even, and getting some responses, positive ones, like, we really like this beat and we really want to do something with it. We'll get back to you. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. There are a number of cases where people have submitted beats and didn't get a response for an extended period of time, and all of a sudden they notice that they're getting a payment for the said beat. They have been credited, but in some cases not so much, meaning that there have been other people who have more name credibility. Their names were tagged on to that beat as though they had something to do with creating it, and they weren't even there. One situation led to someone having a beat that got placed, and they did 100% of the work, and at the end of the day, by the time the artist and all the people associated with the artist took their pieces of the publishing and what have you, they ended up with 2% of the final split on everything, which I don't have to tell you how unjust that is. It is a common practice with some types of people in the music industry, wherein they're in a position where they have the power to do that, and a lot of them will interpret that as you're paying your dues by giving up something, maybe a lot more than you'd care to, but at least you got a track placed on a name artist project, and it's better than some, because some people have had music done and placed on other people's projects and they didn't get credited for it at all. They may have gotten an initial payment, kind of like a work for hire situation. It's the same thing as if you work for a company that makes light bulbs, right? And they have you on a salary. You go in there, you design that light bulb, but your name doesn't go out as being credited for the light bulb. It goes credited under the company's name. You're getting a salary. So that's a work for hire situation where they pay you to come in and do a specific job, either on a one-time basis, or maybe it's for a limited time basis, or maybe it's for an extended time basis. But the bottom line is, we are paying you to do said work. And once you get that payment, you have accepted by contract that is your compensation. So you're not expecting or looking to get any residual income or credit. The patent will go under the name of that company. Some people do things like that in the music business. That same concept where, hey, we paid you to come in and create this track, or we offered you. There was a time where, even before people were selling beats like they are now online, where people were going directly to record companies and trying to get the producers and trying to get record executives to get tracks to artists, and then one such person I know had a track that was placed with a well-known rap artist at that time, and he accepted $10,000 for it. It was probably one of that artist's biggest records ever. I'm sure they made quite a few $1 million out of that, which means that $10,000 in the full scheme of things is not a lot of money. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the fact that I don't have $10,000 now, so that sounds like a lot compared to what I have right now. My thing is, it's not compared to what you're entitled to long term. And that's where in one of our prior episodes, we talked about really knowing what it means to have a contract offered to you and having somebody go over it with you so you get the best compensation and you don't lose. Because you can lose. But some people don't mind paying their dues that way. There's another thing about submitting your tracks. I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. People who are selling their beats. I have one of my colleagues that I work with, and in fact, he's a music publisher. He works with me very extensively. And one of the things we were talking about recently is the fact that a lot of people don't really understand how copyrights work. So for instance, you're selling your beat, who knows what you're getting for it? $100, $500, $5, $10, whatever you're selling it for. That's totally your call. The problem is that you sell that beat, or you license it out, or you lease it out, and somebody comes through and they decide they're going to write something to it and release it. Maybe they're not generating any money, but that version is out there with your name as doing the beat, if your name was even included, and the other person who wrote the lyrics. So let's say that every time you do that, consider this, that's a different version, which they call a derivative work of the original. The original is your beat. The derivative work is where somebody else has added something to it and released it. So if you got your track out there 50 times, there are 50 different versions of your track out there. And when that happens, then that means that it's virtually incredibly difficult to be able to track all of them. So you may think it's a good thing, and it should be if it's documented properly, and a lot of people are not doing that. So they don't even know, because what happens when you go back and research some of those copyrights, as I was saying about the person who submitted a track and then at the end of the day it was like 4 or 5 other names attached to it, that could very well happen when that artist takes the song that they've done and they shop it to a label, they shop it to someone or whatever that's going to release it for them, and people start attaching their names onto it. So you may have 50 different versions, and within that you may actually end up with each version having additional names attached onto there, which are more than just the two of you and the other lyricist. That is an incredible mess to clean up, right? And it happens. So, and people are not paying attention to that. Most people don't know. So the bottom line is, what I suggest is that you get your paperwork and stuff in order first before you start just submitting things out there. Those of you who are out there selling your beats, God bless you, make your money, but make sure that you take care of your business first so that you don't lose in the end. You don't lose the intellectual property that you have created. Okay. Enough said about that. And that goes, the same thing goes for the artists who out there who want to get their music heard by these producers. I think the best thing to do is to go directly to them, ask them if they are accepting material. Just don't blindly send stuff to people, because there's nobody on the other end that's accepting responsibility for receiving it. So you don't even know who, somebody could say it's an artist, but it might be somebody else who is actually working their website. A lot of artists are not really directly involved with their social media. So it may not be them. It might be somebody that works for them. If they're really busy, they don't have time to really do that all the time. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Sometimes what you sent goes to that person, sometimes it doesn't. Make sure your stuff is protected. It's a process. This is a real business. If you're doing it as a hobby, then you can treat it as a hobby. But if you expect to really do this as a business, take care of your business up front so you don't have to go back later and clean it up. Okay, so I hope that answered your question, DW, and good luck to you. All right, when we come back, we're going to touch on that other question about money and the best way to generate money, especially during these times. We'll be right back. And now we bring you an FYI moment. This moment will present to you an example of some of the things that I mentioned in my responses to question 1. And it's sponsored by Cold Cast Couture, a fashion line that is cut from a different cloth, and Overture Entertainment Incorporated, strong inceptions, lasting impressions. Did you know record labels are still accepting and listening to demos? Although the submission process has changed over the years, they still listen. There's some A&R companies like Artist PR that will get your demos to them if you're not comfortable doing it yourself. Also, there's Taxi, which has been around for quite a few decades. Then there's Share to Pros. They're new to me, but they've been around, I guess, for a minute, and they're making a name for themselves. A&R Factory is another. We also have AWOL, A World Artists Love. That's the acronym, in case you were wondering. And Music Gateway. So give it a shot. Coming up next, there's so many different ways that you can generate money doing music, and it's based on your individual skill set and talents. I think that most people do one of two things when it comes to that. Either they see these things and they don't think that there's an opportunity for them, so they don't explore it, or maybe they don't think that they have whatever is required to do that. Find out more when we come back. Are you a rap artist, singer, musician, or a band? We have a program in development especially for you. Are you ready? Yeah. Thank you for remaining in your seats and not leaving class. And now, question 2 in this episode of The Industry 101. Don't forget to stick around for your assignment at the end. And we're back. So our next question comes to us from RC in Yonkers, New York. Thank you, RC, for your submission. And if I didn't say so in the first question, thank you, DW from Bridgeport, Connecticut, for your submission as well. So our question from RC goes as this: what is the best way to generate money doing music during these times? All right, so let me tell you first of all how exciting it is to be in these times. I mean, of course, there's a lot of things going on health-wise, and it's scary, I get it. But look at how much time you actually have to do things that you never had time to do before, right? Some of those ideas have just been sitting on the back burner. Some people's back burners are so piled up with stuff, they can't get to the rest of the stove. Look, if you have an idea, it would be the time for you to start exploring it, developing it, even if you don't fully accomplish it right at this moment, because it could be very vast, very huge, but at least get it started. Same thing holds true to this question about generating money. There's so many different ways that you can generate money doing music, and it's based on your individual skill set and talents. For instance, I write music, I can orchestrate, so if I chose to, I could pursue some opportunities in maybe scoring some films, or maybe writing for television. It's always been a very crowded market and very competitive, so of course you just have to throw your hat in the ring and do things. But maybe you create your own opportunities. Maybe you team up with an independent filmmaker who's got a film going on that they finally had time to shoot, and maybe you are the person that's going to score that film. Right? Nobody else is competing for that because nobody else knows he's doing it. Right? So, there's all kinds of little collaborations and partnerships. You're a producer. I mean, of course, we talked in the first segment about people submitting their beats and selling their beats. That's great. But nothing, I think, is more fulfilling when you're actually right there in the creative process. So maybe because you have those production skills, maybe you are producing some independent artists who are looking for somebody to produce them, right? They have the skills, they can sing, they can rap, whatever it is that they do. They just need to find somebody who can give them that proper support musically to just bring their talents out. Maybe you're that person. So you could do that. There are local commercials. There's a lot of local companies who are still doing commercials for local television, local cable networks. Maybe they're looking for background music. Maybe there's some shows that are developing online that you can do music for, right? There are just so many vast opportunities to do things, and I think that most people do one of two things when it comes to that. Either they see these things and they don't think that there's an opportunity for them, so they don't explore it, or maybe they don't think that they have whatever is required to do that particular thing, but they have thought about it. It has been a thought. They just didn't move on it because, I don't have the best equipment, so I'm just not going to pursue it until I get the best equipment. Start with what you have. Use what you have. because at least moving and creating some kind of momentum will build up some situations for you where eventually you can earn what you need to get the better equipment, right? People have created records on things you would not believe with far less than what we have access to today, and they've been hit records, and they still sound good now. If you hear them on the radio, you go to a club when we could go to the club, you're just amazed at what you hear. And to know that it started with a very small piece of equipment that only did, drum sounds and drum tracks and some sampling. Maybe they sampled some sounds and put it together. Whatever they did, they didn't have what you would think they had. They didn't have access to studios. There's some producers I know that they had what we used to have then was a 4-track recorder, which is essentially a recorder that only recorded on and used cassette tapes, if you even know what that is. There's 2 tracks on each side of that cassette. The 4-track would record on 2 of those tracks that were playing in this direction, and at the same time you had access to the tracks on the other side of that tape, which had reversible heads. So even though it's going in the same direction, if you flip it over, what you played, if you played in a regular cassette, it was playing whatever you recorded on it backwards. So the reversible heads allowed you to record on all 4 tracks of that cassette. And some people made some really serious demos. I use it all the time. So the bottom line is, I'm saying that to say this: do not wait. Do not wait to explore the opportunities that could be there waiting for you. That could be just sitting there waiting for you to put your hands on it, or bring your gift to it, bring your talent to it. If you're a singer, maybe you can do, of course we talked about it in another episode, doing online concerts. Maybe you could teach. Maybe you could teach what it is that you do in a Zoom class. I see people doing that all over the place. You set up your PayPal account, have them deposit whatever they need to deposit, and you have your set time and day of when they're supposed to click in, and you invite them in, and you do your class for however long your class is for, and you do it. You call it a master class. We're doing one, right? So the whole thing is that there's so many different ways to do things that were never available before because they didn't exist before. But somebody had to come up with it. Somebody had to come up with that idea. And I'm really thinking that if you sat still long enough and didn't get overwhelmed by all that's going on, you could probably come up with at least 3 ways that you could make money right now, today. I'm pretty sure you could do that. Trust yourself. Go out on a limb. Maybe you came up with an idea that nobody's even doing right now. Nobody's ever done it. That is possible, to come up with something that nobody's ever done before. What is the most difficult for most people is to trust themselves to be a pioneer and blaze a trail through a field that didn't exist there before. It is difficult, it is challenging, but it is not impossible. And I encourage you to start thinking like that. Start thinking as an innovator, and you'd be surprised as to what you will come up with and what you will allow yourself to see and do. It's amazing. It's amazing. So I don't think that there's a set way or standard ways or the best ways in terms of anybody generating revenue. I think the best way, if that is a thing, is the best way that fits you, the best way that highlights your gifts and talents, because you can make money doing what it is that you know how to do. I know people were making money cleaning sneakers. It is a thing. It's somebody, a lot of people like their sneakers cleaned, and they would send them their sneakers to be cleaned, and they would pay to have that done and sent back to them. Right? I know that was a hustle for a lot of people in high school, and some of the young people that I know in my community and my adjoining communities, they were doing all kinds of stuff. So just sit still long enough and give it some thought. I'm sure you'll come up with something. All right? So RC in Yonkers, New York, you're a genius. I know it. I just sense it just by the fact you asked that question. You have a skill that is waiting for you to explore it and exploit it and make some money. All right. Thank you. We'll be right back. Get ready to take notes, because here's this week's assignment. Question number 1. Do you think recording artists could take the same route as producers and submit their music to name artists to get their music heard? Great question. In my response, I said, make sure you protect your music. Copyright it before you submit it to anyone. Make sure that you have all the information correct so that you can be credited the way you're supposed to. Inquire about their interest in receiving new music before you send it to them. Lots of times we make the assumption that because we have a song that's perfect for an artist, that they're actually looking for it. Also, confirm the contact information. Know who you're sending it to and who's going to be receiving it. This way you can keep track of how it's being processed. Question number 2. What is the best way to generate money doing music during these times? Another excellent question. In my response to that question, I said, use your time to explore and develop past ideas. We all have them. They've just been sitting in the back of our head waiting for us to pick them back up and move them along. I also said, seek collaborations or create opportunities of your own. Sometimes you have to do that in order to make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And thirdly, use your skills and talents to possibly teach. You can teach a class or a workshop or even conduct a forum right online. And this episode's tip? Do not wait. Start with whatever you have to work with. Don't worry, the resources will come as you keep moving. Stay driven. That about wraps it up for us this time. I'd like to thank our viewers, DW from Bridgeport, Connecticut, and RC from Yonkers, New York. Thank you for your submissions. Great questions. Welcome to the Industry 101 family. Thank you, Team 101. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to all of you, our viewers, who come back and visit with us each time. In closing, I'd like to say I'm your host, Robbie Jenkins. See you next time in the Industry 101. Take care. Yeah.